Good afternoon and welcome to our first New York Seafood and Aquaculture office hours. While this is the first, we do plan to coordinate future office hours to address key topics related to seafood and aquaculture in New York. Today's office hours will provide an opportunity to connect communities and industries across New York State with the agencies involved in regulating seafood and aquaculture. Our goal is to foster a collaborative and inclusive environment, so we ask all participants to be mindful of time and use respectful language. Please keep your contributions focused on the topic presented today, and if you have other topics of interest, we encourage you to share them in the session evaluation, and we'll do our best to address them during future office hours. While we welcome open dialogue, we kindly ask that participants refrain from off-topic or disruptive behavior. We aim to make today's session and all future office hours informative and valuable for everyone. Because this session is set up as a Zoom meeting, all participants do have the ability to share audio and video, but we do kindly ask that you keep your audio muted unless you're actively asking a question during the Q&A, which we'll host at the end of the meeting. You can turn on and off your audio and video using the camera and microphone icons in the Zoom window. And we welcome you to share any questions in the chat at any time and ask you to raise your hand using the react icon and wait to be called on if you would like to ask your question out loud. With that, I'd like to kick off today's session by introducing our state partners who will discuss their roles in the regulation of seafood and aquaculture in New York. We'll have 3 agencies represented, including the Department of Agriculture and Markets, the Department of Environmental Conservation, and the Department of Health. With the Department of Agriculture and Markets, we'll hear from Angela Montalbano, Assistant Director of the Division of Food Safety and Inspection, and Kelly Young, the Director of Agricultural Development. With the Department of Environmental Conservation, we'll hear from Wade Carden, biologist with the Division of Marine Resources, Shellfish Management Unit, and Steve Hurst, Chief of the Bureau of Fisheries in the Division of Fish and Wildlife. Lastly, with the Department of Health, we'll hear from Jessica Egan, Chief of Food Protection. I'd like to thank all of our state partners for participating and all of you for joining today's session. And with that, I'll pass the screen over to Angela.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for the warm welcome. Yes, I'm Angela Montalbano. I am the Assistant Director for Food Safety and Inspection, and we do have the regulatory authority over a myriad of food products. But I'll begin by telling you that the Department of Agriculture's mission is to promote New York State agriculture and its very high quality and diverse products. We foster agriculture environmental stewardship and safeguard the state's food supply, land, and livestock to ensure the viability and growth of New York State's agricultural industries. That is very, very important to us. The department also provides a vital service to people across the state. We do work very hard to ensure that New York State's food supply and animal food supply is safe to consume. We offer licensing of businesses and we conduct inspections, and we collaborate with partners, many of which are on the phone right now. And we do also work with new and innovative approaches to advance food safety. This work truly is critical to ensuring the safety of the food supply and its maintenance from producer to consumer. Agriculture and Markets Division of Food Safety and Inspection has regulatory oversight of, like I already had mentioned, a multitude, a myriad, a large variety of food processing establishments. We also have other food-based businesses in New York State. So it relates to seafood, which is what we're all here for today. So Food Safety and Inspection has licensing oversight of primary seafood processors, wholesale secondary seafood processors, and all retail seafood markets that they sell and process any seafood product, and facilities that also process seaweed or hold and distribute processed seaweed for human consumption, as well as manufacturers and distributors of commercial animal food, including the aquaculture of seafood and medicated animal food. We, like I mentioned earlier, we truly have a very, very large jurisdictional responsibility. It is really from a gas station selling milk and eggs to a very large manufacturer. So you might get a feel for the depth of what the regulatory action has for food safety and inspection. At this point, I'm done explaining what food safety and inspection does, and I believe Kelly Young is on the line to follow up.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
My name's Kelly Young. I'm the Director of Ag Development at the Department of Ag and Markets, and we are kind of the other side of the spectrum from what Angela and her team deals with. Whereas they're regulatory, we don't have any regulatory activities. We are really the promotion and market development side of the agency for agricultural products. So in ag development, we focus on some core areas of business development so that you would see that on the ground as a number of state and federally funded grant programs and technical assistance that we might provide. For instance, Cornell and cooperative extension programs. In some cases, the Department of Ag and Markets provides funding for them. We also support food and nutrition programs managed by the department. So you would see that on the ground as the Nourish New York program, which helps move New York food to food banks and other food insecure communities in the state. The New York school food programs that we support for purchasing New York state food, bringing it into schools, farmers market programs that we support, and even the executive order from the governor, we call it EO 32, and that encourages New York State agencies to purchase at least 30% of their food from the state. And then kind of the third arm of what we work on is marketing and promotion. So you will see that as Taste New York and the New York State Grown and Certified brands. You might see those along the thruway at the New York State Welcome Centers. And hopefully you've seen some products that have the Grown and Certified label on them, which ties back to both being a New York product and also meeting environmental and food safety standards. Our marketing promotion team also helps support our New York State producers with both trade show and export assistance. So while we offer a number of different grant programs, and those can change year to year depending on what's funded at the federal and the state levels, sometimes we offer those directly. When we do that, it's usually to nonprofits, universities, educational institutions, or the like. Or we offer grant opportunities through an administrator, and those are able to go direct to farmers or other food producers. There's a couple of programs, grant programs, that I wanted to highlight because I think they'll be of particular interest to this group potentially. Right now, we have a grant program open for the New York State Grown and Certified in Innovation, Technology, Research, and Development grants. Those are currently open through February 28th. You have to have a food product that would bear the New York State Grown and Certified label that you're working towards or producing. But that is offered through the New York Farm Viability Institute, and the grants range from $20,000 to $250,000. So there's some significant investment potentially from the state. If you're interested in those, I'm going to throw something, an email for our team into the chat so that if you have any questions on follow-up, you don't have to write everything down. Just reach out to us and we'll help you. Also, I wanted to highlight, we have in the region in the Northeast a regional food business center that's funded by USDA. They will shortly, late winter, early spring, be offering business builder grants that will be up to $100,000 for food producers to take advantage of. That information is not out yet, but I wanted to get it flagged for you to keep an eye out if you think that would be interesting. That program is for food systems and networks within the region. And then finally, I wanted to highlight that the governor announced in her State of the State in January and put into her budget $10 million for a food and fiber small scale processing grant program. So while obviously we would be developing the details of that program once the state budget is passed in April, that is another opportunity for those who are interested in food processing or kind of middle of the supply chain activity. Very, very specific to seafood, the governor had several activities that she charged us with last year in her State of the State. One of those was a seafood processing study that we partnered with Suffolk County CCE on. They are deep into the data collection and work on that right now. I know that they have been reaching out to a bunch of different participants in that part of the food system and trying to gauge so many different things from where would a Long Island seafood processor be, what would be the products, what is the market demand, and who would be potential operators of that for the good of serving the entire island. So I know that they plan to share some of that information at the Seafood Summit in March. So we're all avidly looking forward to that. The second item was developing a seafood cuisine trail in Long Island. We also partnered with Suffolk CCE, and there was so much demand. They're actually building 2 different seafood cuisine trails, which I think is super exciting. So those are tourism, agritourism related. There's a number of restaurants, but there's also other seafood related and aquaculture related stops that are highlighted on those. The South Shore Trail has been developed. It is in the final approval processes, and we hope that will be unveiled soon. And the North Shore, then they'll shift to really working through the details of that one. Once that's developed, once those 2 trails are available, there'll be an online, like an app that you can download on your phone to follow those. And we're looking at other opportunities to promote them in New York City, across Long Island, and the state to really drive interest to Long Island to participate in the aquaculture and seafood industries. And then finally, there was $5 million allocated for aquaculture assistance grants on Long Island. We are working through the details of that and hope to have news for the industry soon on that. But that was the 3-pronged approach that the governor approved last year. Thank you, guys. That's all I have right now.
Thanks, Kelly and Angela. We'll now transition to DEC. So I'll pass the screen to Wade.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name is Wade Carden. I'm the unit leader with the Shellfish Management Unit here at DEC's Division of Marine Resources in Kings Park, and I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay, everyone seeing that okay?
Yep.
All right, so DEC's regulations for aquaculture and seafood are shared by 2 different divisions of the agency. Division of Fish and Wildlife handle freshwater seafood, so commercial fish hatcheries, specifically trout and black bass, and management of all freshwater fisheries resources. They also manage the importation, sale, and stocking of triploid grass carp and the collection and sale of bait fish. And you'll hear more about that from Steve Hurst here in just a moment. But just quick intro for the Division of Marine Resources. We have oversight of marine aquaculture permitting, management of all commercial and recreational marine fisheries, issuance of marine licenses and permits, and mollusk and shellfish food safety. So I'll go ahead now and pass it over to Steve Hurst to talk about his role with the Division of Fish and Wildlife and oversight of freshwater seafood products, and be back with you to go over marine seafood products.
Thanks, Wade. I appreciate it. And Mike, to correct you before, I am not an expert, but we're going to do the best we can here to give everyone on the line a really high-level view of what Division of Fish and Wildlife within DEC does in regards to aquaculture. So, as Wade kind of mentioned before, Division of Fish and Wildlife has the regulatory oversight to manage and protect the state's freshwater fisheries resource, and that's really our bread and butter, all right? And we also promote ecological and social benefits associated with fishing and provide angling opportunities for recreational and consumption purposes. Lastly, we ensure that the fish liberated into our waters of the state do not pose a risk to the ecological integrity of our valuable freshwater fisheries resources. And what that really means is we're trying to keep diseases, pathogens, parasites out of our waters that could negatively affect our very valuable fisheries. And we really go out on a limb to do that. And I'm proud to say, I think that we really have done some good protection of our waters over the years, especially with all the invasive species that have come in. Next slide, please, Wade. All right, so as mentioned earlier, one of the aquaculture related things that we do is trout. We permit operation of trout and bass hatcheries. Trout hatcheries, basically when we say trout, that's brook trout, brown trout, and rainbow trout. And these permits authorize an individual to operate a private commercial trout hatchery. It allows for the breeding, raising, and selling of hatchery trout. And it's an annual application, annual license, And there's a ton of information on our website about this, but trout are sold for both consumptive purposes and for raising trout to stock into the waters of the state of New York. People need a stocking permit though, before they can place those waters into the state of New York. Next slide, Wade. Similarly, black bass, and what I mean by black bass, that is largemouth bass and smallmouth bass as defined in regulation. Once again, the permit that we offer authorizes an individual to operate a private commercial black bass hatchery. Same as trout, allows for the breeding, raising, and sale of black bass. But unlike the trout hatcheries, only largemouth bass may be sold for human consumption. Annual application and annual license, similar to trout hatchery. And the selling of black bass for human consumption is a relatively new rule. When I say relatively new, it's probably about 15 years now. But we opened that market up some time ago to allow some of the raisers in New York State to get into those markets. Next slide, please. Lastly, and next we have permits to import and sell certified triploid grass carp. Triploid grass carp are used to manage vegetation in private waters. The permit allows the importing of grass carp, the holding of grass carp in self-contained holding tanks from March 1 to November 30th. What that means is we do not let people keep those fish for more than that period, because it could be a potential risk. The selling of grass carp to New York State licensed grass carp stocking permit holders. They have to have a permit which is approved by DEC before grass carp can be put into their pond. And the frequency of application is once, and there's no expiration date. Next slide, Wade. We also have licenses to sell bait fish, and those licenses allow for the harvest of bait fish in certain waters and also aquatic insects. It allows for the selling of disease-free certified or uncertified bait for wholesale and retail purposes. We'll get into the disease-free a little bit later. Same with the frequency of application is January 1 to December 31st. The fees vary by gear type. We don't have a lot of people doing commercial harvest of bait fish, but we do have a tremendous amount of bait fish importation in the state. Next slide. So fish disease certification. Before any fish goes into the water of the state of New York, those fish have to be certified disease-free. And what that means is basically we are trying to keep these 8 known pathogens out of our waterways. And I'm not going to go through all of them, and I am not an expert in any of these by any means. We have a fish pathologist on site at DEC who is the head of this program. But basically, anyone who is raising fish of any kind that is destined for the waters of the state of New York have to have their fish tested for these 8 pathogens before they can be certified to go into the waters of the state of New York. I think that was the last slide for me, Wade. Could be wrong.
Yeah, that looks like it.
Yeah, I just hope that's a very, very high level. And like I said, we're open for questions.
Okay, so bringing us back down here to the Marine District, just to recap, DEC through the Division of Marine Resources is the lead state agency for administration and regulatory oversight of permitting for all marine, plant, and animal life culture. And DMR is also responsible for management of the state's marine, estuarine, and anadromous resources. And DMR administers issuance of marine licenses and permits for the commercial harvest, landing, shipment, processing, in the case of shellfish only, and sale for the state's important commercial fisheries. So DMR's regulatory oversight of marine aquaculture permitting is found in the Environmental Conservation Law, Article 13, as well as Part 48 of Title 6 in the Code's rules and regulations. The majority of our marine aquaculture here around Long Island is oyster farming, conducted in gear and containment, what we refer to as off-bottom culture. Few definitions here when we're talking about marine hatcheries, on-bottom and off-bottom culture. Marine hatchery could be an umbrella term for a shore-based facility that actually spawns broodstock and to produce larvae and juvenile marine life. Or in the case of shellfish production, could also refer to nursery systems that might be in the nearshore environment, such as floating upweller system. On-bottom culture is, from the perspective of growing shellfish, is broadcasting shellfish directly out onto the bay bottom. So there is no gear involved. It's freely seeding shellfish onto the bottom. Off-bottom culture, which is the primary farming method we have here in New York, involves culture of shellfish in bags, cages, racks, trays that are deployed on the bay bottom, suspended in the water column or otherwise floating at the surface. So DMR's role in food safety regulations is primarily for molluscan shellfish, that being clams, mussels, oysters, and scallops. DMR is responsible for the issuance of shellfish shipper and processor permits, as well as shellfish digger permits. That's just a commercial harvester permit. Shellfish shipper and digger permits are required for both wild harvested and farm-raised shellfish. And DMR's Shellfish Inspection Unit conducts shellfish dealer certifications, as well as HACCP and sanitary inspections of wholesale shellfish shipper facilities throughout New York State. These shipper and harvester permits are regulated under both the environmental conservation law and state regulation. Again, Article 13 in Part 42. There's several different types of shellfish shipper permits, as you can see listed here. And the interstate shipment of any shellfish requires certification and listing on the Interstate Certified Shellfish Shippers List, which is maintained by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Very quickly, a Class A shellfish shipper permit allows the holder to buy shellfish from permitted harvesters, those holding a digger permit. Class B adds the ability to process those shellfish, such as shucking operation. Class C is a reshipper, receiving shell stock from a shipper and then sending it onward. A Class D is for a shellfish harvester to sell a product that they have either themselves harvested or grown through aquaculture. And a Class E permit is specifically for the bay scallop fishery. For shellfish digger permits, which is a commercial permit required by DEC for any commercial harvest of shellfish, it's to take shellfish from certified waters, and holders of the permit must complete a shellfish harvester education certification program every 5 years to maintain the permit. So again, DEC's role in food safety, really limited to molluscan shellfish. Sanitation, the Shellfish Sanitation Regulatory Program has to conform with the national standards and federal guidelines of the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. And both DEC's shellfish program and the federal program are there to promote the safety of raw molluscan shellfish shipped into interstate commerce, and of course to protect the public health of shellfish consumers. Our program here at DEC is evaluated annually by FDA for conformance with those guidelines found within the national program. And all of the regulations that we implement for sanitary control of shellfish have to be consistent with the national program for the state to remain in compliance. In addition to the shellfish food safety program, there's also public health mandates related to doing year-round water sampling for the waters around Long Island to certify them. We conduct sanitary surveys over 1 million acres of shellfish lands to certify that they're safe for harvest to be used as a food product. We also conduct marine biotoxin monitoring in designated areas of Nassau and Suffolk counties for toxins that could accumulate from harmful algal blooms that would make shellfish unsafe for consumption. We also operate the only FDA certified lab in New York for processing water samples to classify shellfish growing areas to meet the classification standards of the national program. And you can learn more about this seawater sampling program or harvest area classification program through this shellfish mapper we have linked through our website. You can see a lot of red here back over towards the west and then in the New York City area. Obviously, those areas have been closed for a very long time just based on the number of shoreline features and combined sewer overflows. But coming back out further east on Long Island, you see less red and some areas that are a royal blue color. Those are areas that are conditionally approved for a certain part of the year, usually the winter months. So anytime we have any emergency rainfall closures or harmful algal bloom closures, they are typically updated on this map in real time. So here's just some contact information for both Steve's division and our division here in Kings Park for marine aquaculture permits, shellfish shipper permits, and general information on marine licenses and permits.
All right, thank you, Wade and Steve. And so we'll jump over to Jessica, our last speaker from the Department of Health, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thanks, Mike. Let me just share my screen here. All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm with the New York State Department of Health, and I'll just take a few minutes here to walk you through the touch points that the Department of Health has with the seafood and aquaculture industry in New York State. So there's two main areas in which we interact with the aquaculture industry, indirectly through our regulation of food service establishments, as well as guidance that is directed to consumers. So we have two main bureaus within the department that fulfill these roles. First is our Bureau of Toxic Substance Assessment. Our Bureau of we call it BTSA, assesses the potential for exposure and risk when people come into contact with toxic substances, could be through air, water, soil, food, and consumer products. And specific to the aquaculture and seafood industries, you'll see this mainly with our regional fish advisories. So the intent is to raise public awareness for the potential for exposure to different types of contaminants from consuming locally caught fish. And it is directed towards consumers, to the public, to help people make healthy decisions about the different fish products that they consume. So we collaborate closely with DEC. DEC does analysis of different samples of fish caught throughout New York State and provides that data to the Department of Health for evaluation and inclusion in our advisories. So this is just a screenshot of what our public page looks like. And when I get done here, I'll pop some of these links into the chat. But this just gives you an idea of what you will find when you visit this site. So there's a map of New York State, and it allows you to drill down to the different county levels, the different waterways, and see any advisories that we have published. And we break it down by the type of fish, and then the different population types. So the general populations compared to some of our more sensitive populations, children, pregnant women, and then the different chemicals of concern. The other touch point that we have with the aquaculture industry surrounds food safety regulation. So we administer Part 14 of the state sanitary code, which applies to all of our regulated food service establishments. So if you think of restaurants, mobile food trucks, temporary food service events, school food services, any of those types of facilities are regulated by the health department under Part 14 of the state sanitary code. And the main thing that you'll notice as coming in from the industry is that what we look for is that our regulated establishments are getting any shellfish or other fish products from an approved source. And that means that whoever is supplying that product to the restaurant has the appropriate licenses from DEC for harvesting, is adhering to processing requirements, and in the case of catfish, has USDA oversight. And then additionally, at the restaurant level, we're looking to make sure that cooking temperatures are adhered to and that consumer advisories are published as needed. So that's it in a nutshell. Here's my contact information if there are any other questions. And as I said, I will get those links into the chat if anybody wants additional information.
All right, thank you, Jessica, and thank you for all our partners who've shared now. So I want to transition into our Q&A, and I'm going to start with the questions that were added on the registration, so those questions that we were provided in advance. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll get to those once we get through our pre-loaded questions, and then we'll open it up for additional questions as time allows. So we'll start with the first question of what are the regulations on selling hatchery-raised fish and aquaponically grown vegetables to restaurants and markets?
So Mike, I can take a stab at that if you'd like. So from the Department of Health perspective, we don't have any source requirements for produce. So a restaurant can source their produce from a local farmer, from a supermarket or a distributor. There are no specific requirements on that end. Specific to hatcheries, it's sort of a new territory for us. Most of our regulated establishments are going to be getting fish from processors. So I would say if you have a hatchery and you're interested in selling directly to a food service establishment, definitely reach out to the department and we can help walk you through whatever needs to be done, as well as working in collaboration with some of our DEC and Ag and Markets partners.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. I know there is also upstate, I don't know if Steve, you want to touch on it quick, for trout sold for consumption. I believe there's a tagging or labeling requirement associated with that.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Mike. Whether they're carcasses or they are live fish, if they're carcasses, they have got to be boxed or tagged individually. If they are live fish, they have to be in a container with the name and address of the person selling and the person receiving those fish.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
And
and then go ahead.
One more thing. So black bass, all black bass for the market must be killed. There's no sale of live black bass.
Okay. All right.
Thanks,
and then
Mike.
shellfish is very different, but that's not usually coming from the hatchery. So I don't know if that's within this question. I don't know, Wade or DEC down Marine, do you want to add anything?
No, nothing to add there.
All right. All right, so we'll jump to the next question we received. How many New York aqua farms and are they all certified with ASC or BAP? We'll start with that one and then go to the second part. I know Barry put a link in the chat to all of the aquaculture operations that we're aware of across New York State that he had produced. Barry is the aquaculture specialist with us at New York Sea Grant. As far as ASC and BAP, I don't know if any agencies can actually speak to that. I can say that they're not all certified with either of those, and I don't think we have many that are. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? Barry, are you aware of any that are ASC or BAP certified?
I think I know local coho local coho doesn't matter anymore. But Hudson Valley might be BAP. I'm not familiar with the other one as well. But often they typically would have that on their website,
Yeah.
you know, because it's a point of,
Mhm.
you know, upselling their product.
Yep, and I would say a lot of those certifications, those third-party certifying bodies can be very costly and expensive and are usually more prominent in large-scale commercial operations, which we have a limited number of operating in New York. The second part of that question was, does New York State have regulations on feed and practices, which I am assuming is feeding practices? So does any agency regulate feed used in aquaculture?
So New York State does have regulations for feeds. We actually just started a whole new program, but we will have to make sure that the fish feed is included in that inspection process.
Great.
Yeah, and I believe, Mike, that any feed that is medicated has to be prescribed by a veterinarian. But besides that, we don't have like standards for phosphorus or fish meal matter, you know, percentages. We don't have that as a part of our license condition.
All right, thanks, Steve and Angela. And I'll also add that through commercial production and processing, HACCP plans cover a lot of potential contaminants in those products, which producers would need to be wary of when it comes to purchasing farm product and what might be in those products. So it falls a lot of the time on the processors. All right, so we'll jump to our next question. Can you break down the percent of wild versus farmed shellfish in the region? Clams, oysters, mussels, and scallops.
Okay, so as I mentioned in the talk there, our marine aquaculture is nearly entirely oysters, so I can give you some recent production numbers there. Going back to 2002, we had 6.8 million pieces of farmed oysters in the state. That represented 82% of all oysters landed in 2022 and was valued at 5.1 million. 2023, that number increases to 7.4 million oysters produced, and that was 86% of all oysters landed in the state for the year at a value of 5.6 million. And 2024, we had a really big jump up to 9.5 million oysters produced. We're still getting some reports trickling in both from farmed producers as well as wild harvesters, but so far looking like that represents about 92% of all oysters landed in the state at a value of 7.1 million.
Thanks, Wade. All right, so next question was any ideas on how we can improve public relations about shellfish safety in New York?
Okay, that's me. I'll take that again. DMR is planning to initiate targeted social media outreach during the year to educate the public on DEC's water quality sampling, sanitary controls for the shellfish industry and growers, harmful algal bloom monitoring. And all of these are done to promote and ensure the safety of New York's shellfish for consumers and conform with the stringent requirements of the National Shellfish Sanitation Program. We have been discussing this issue with the representatives of the Long Island Oyster Growers Association, who have raised this same concern about the impacts of negative press on consumer confidence and the safety of oysters and their shellfish sales. And I just jumping back to the public shellfish mapper, I see where Barry dropped that into the chat, but I can share my screen again and just show you quickly some of the functionality that would relate to this. So is everyone seeing the map?
Yes.
Okay, so you can zoom in around here. I'll go here close to where we are in Kings Park. You can click on closures and it'll give you different information about that particular closure. but also you have a lot of layer lists here, including all of the harvest area classification units, shellfish sampling stations. So as you can see, there are a lot of them, and anywhere that's not colored royal blue or red is certified, meaning it is open to shellfish harvest year round. And all of these stations are sampled on average 5 to 6 times per year. So that really just drives home the point that there's a lot of effort to make sure that all of the waters from which shellfish are harvested that are certified, consumers can be confident that they're getting a safe seafood product.
Right. Thanks, Wade. All right. Before we move on to another question, any clarifying questions or additional questions that we've got from our participants? Feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask that question verbally, or put that in the chat. All right, I'll jump to the last question we received, although I think the real people who need to answer this one are not on the call. So I will get back to this individual with more information, but I think Kelly can provide a little bit of a general answer to this. And that was, how do you come up with the eligibility requirements for New York caught seafood? And that was specifically in reference to the Grown and Certified program. So how do fishermen become eligible to be in that Grown and Certified program?
Sure, thanks, Michael. The Grown and Certified program is built on the premise that it is a New York product. If it is not just a whole raw ingredient product, if it has multiple ingredients or it's processed, then it has to be at least 51% of New York ingredients. And that's coupled with meeting food safety requirements and environmental stewardship requirements. So each product that is able to be included in the Grown and Certified program has maybe slightly different food safety and environmental components that they meet. So we work closely with the industry in identifying what are those that make sense. What requirements does the state already have? In the case of seafood, I'll put the application in the chat so that anyone who's interested could go check out all the details and the specifics. But essentially, you just have to be in compliance with the permit and the rules and requirements of the other agencies in the state that also regulate seafood, and the finfish in particular, I think, is the question here. So for those folks, they have to be landed here in New York, and they have to also be a species that's native to the East Coast. So if it's not processed, those are the requirements, but I'll share that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. All right. Any clarifying questions? Any additional questions? Those were all the questions we received in advance. All right, so we're opening up. We do still have maybe about 10 minutes to put any other questions or answer any other questions anyone might have. All right, while you're thinking, I might pose a question. I think this is largely maybe Angela can answer a little bit, but seaweed is a new product for New York and across the country. And I know we've been doing work and trying to provide some guidance around that. Do you have any thing you can share about where the agency stands in terms of seaweeds and how that is processed and brought to market in New York?
Sure. So seaweed is considered a food once it's out of the water. If it's being dry, well, I think you dry it first anyway, right? Or some people dry it and then cook it, or whatever else you do with seaweed. So whatever that process is, it is regulated under 21 CFR Part 117. So with that process, we do expect a scheduled process, which is a recipe type of an item document that is prepared by a process authority, which is a scientist that can ensure that your product and your process is being completed so the food is safe. So I don't know if Dr. Olga Padilla is not on the line right now, but Dr. Olga Padilla from Cornell University has been working for several years since we have started the seaweed work group. And they have prepared all kinds of studies and documentation that can assist someone that is interested in participating in a seaweed schedule process. And we would just inspect it just as another facility for good manufacturing practices under 21 CFR Part 117. Does that help?
Yep, thanks, Angela.
Sure
And I'll
thing.
say that we've done a lot of work with Olga and Ag and Markets on that. I did put a link in the chat to our seaweed resources webpage that has some of the work, especially the processing pilot studies that were done with the Food Venture Center. I'll also put a link in the chat for anybody who's not familiar or aware of our seafood guides that has a lot of information on seafood regulations in New York and various topics related to processing and marketing seaweeds or seafoods in New York. And I think actually there's another seaweed related question. I don't know if Kelly, you have an answer, but I know this recently came up with seaweeds and the Grown and Certified program. They're not currently included. Is there any progress, or are you thinking of working towards including seaweeds in the Grown and Certified program?
We're always open to and inviting products to be included in the Grown and Certified program. I would invite anybody who's looking at seeking that to just reach out to us, and we can chat a little bit more. And we will develop an application once we have all the pieces put together of what requirements need to be met, and then we would be happy to have those products join the program.
Great, thanks, Kelly. I just put that link in the chat to our seafood guides. And then we had a comment from Roy, would like to see more educational materials about New York aquaculture to promote local products and teach about aquaculture using local resources. I see Barry's already on it. Barry is our aquaculture specialist. So maybe Roy and Barry. Roy is the past teacher for the Harbor School. So I know Roy well, we've worked with him for a while, but you two should definitely connect and talk about some educational opportunities with aquaculture. All right, let's see. Ooh, the long question in here. All right, so as part of the effort to increase stability, sustainability, and to minimize the environmental impacts of recirculating aquaculture systems, the fish manure solids filtered from the RAS system can be used as a quality fertilizer. These RAS systems have the ability to capture their fish manure, suspended solids from their filtering processes, dewater those solids, and utilize those dewatered fish solids as a quality fertilizer, potentially in much the same way as dairy manure. In New York State, dairies have the ability and the requirement to develop and utilize manure management programs monitored and administered by Ag and Markets. However, the RAS fish farms, even if the fish solids are dewatered, those fish solids fall under the purview of New York State DEC because it's DEC jurisdiction. These dried fish biosolids are not able to be used similar to dairy manure under a manure management program to fertilize fields. Nor are these dewatered fish solids able to be taken off-site to further process into fertilizer products for consumers. So the question, I think, is why is that all dried fish biosolids do not fall under Ag and Markets plan? Who or what offices in DEC and Ag and Markets could be contacted to work with to try and change this treatment so that the dewatered fish biosolids can be a valuable byproduct of the RAS fish system? Ooh. All right, anybody have any thoughts on that or anything they want to share?
Yeah, I mean, the primary contact at DEC, Mike, would be our Division of Water. I don't have their contact information readily available, but you can find it on the DEC website. But Division of Water.
Okay, Division of Water. Ag and Markets have any ever dealt with this or heard of this before? We might have the wrong people from Ag and Markets to answer that question today.
Oh, Katie, go ahead. Go ahead. You're on mute, Katie.
Sorry about that. I get that every time. So yes, what I would say with regard to this particular question is that would be a different team that is on the line today, but I will drop my contact information in the chat. So feel free to send me your question and I will make sure to put you in touch with the right folks to kind of start to delve into that issue.
All right, great. So John, we'll get you connected to the right people at Ag and Markets who are not on the call today to help address that question.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question for Steve regarding the fish health diagnostician. I was curious if that person's role, can they help with any fish testing or disease issues from the private sector? Or is that specifically more just for DEC hatcheries?
No, he is primarily to assist in our DEC hatcheries and do some wild fish surveillance. But that being said, persons can call him and you would contact him. His name is Andy Noyes. He's the New York State fish pathologist, and he is at the Rome Fish Disease Control Center. And the number for that is 315-337-0910. And Andy can help explain the certification program. He can tell you what type of test needs to be run on those fish and how the sampling should take place. But we do not do the sampling or any of the testing.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, thanks, Steve. Any last questions? We got 2 minutes left for questions.
Yeah, Mike, if I could just jump in real quick. One of the things I did want to say, and first off, thank you so much for coordinating this conversation. You know, by way of background into this conversation, this really kicked off with Governor Hochul's 2024 State of the State Blue Food Transformation Initiative. So over the last couple of months, the states that you see represented here, as well as the Empire State Development, have been meeting regularly to talk through some of the feedback that we solicited from the industry. But this conversation really has kind of been triggered from those initial discussions, and we're very open to your feedback, your questions, your concerns, because we do want to continue to promote the industry here in New York State. So I just want to thank everyone for participating in today's call, and I'll kick it over back to Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Katie. All right, last call for questions. Otherwise, I'll have a couple more things to share and request, but then we're going to wrap up for today. I'll start with, I put a link in the chat earlier. I think Kelly mentioned our annual New York Seafood Summit. We do have 2 summit events coming up. Our Upstate Summit is March 3rd. That's going to be held in Geneva. The focus of that is going to be on anglers, and especially anglers fishing for food. We'll have the Department of Health and DEC there doing some updates, as well as a research panel of various researchers doing work in fisheries and angling, as well as contaminants. We'll have March 28th is our Riverhead Summit. That's going to be at the Riverhead Free Library. All summits are from 1 to 4 p.m. And that one's going to go into a panel on feasibility of seafood processing in New York. We'll have our usual industry spotlights. We'll also be talking a little bit about the new traceability rule that's coming down the line that does impact most of the seafood industry, which does fall under the new traceability rule that comes into effect in 2026. So the link in the chat is where you can find more information about the summit. It'll be updated as available. There's also the registration for our March 3rd and our March 28th events is now open. All right, but with that, I'd like to thank all of our partners again for sharing and everyone who joined us for today's call. Before signing off, we do ask that you complete the session evaluation, which can be accessed by scanning the QR code that's on the slide now, or via the link that Barry is going to share in the chat shortly. This will be used to help us determine the frequency of our future office hour sessions, as well as the topics that are going to be covered. If you have specific questions after today, feel free to reach out to me directly. My contact information is on the slide. And remember, this session was recorded and will be available online. Once it's available, we'll follow up with a link to the Seafood and Aquaculture Office Hours webpage, which Barry will also put in the chat now as well. And on behalf of New York Sea Grant and our state partners, we thank you again for participating in today's session and hope to see you again in future office hours. Thanks, everybody.